Guess we'll start. Who's starting? Should I start?
Yes, Julie, I think so.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. Our first webinar with Skylar. We're going to introduce in a second. So I'm Julie and one of the co-founders of Reve Health. And so anybody who doesn't know me, Maddy and I connected as when I was her patient and working together over months. And I realized that Maddy just was brilliant in her unique perspective on everything with Chinese medicine and functional medicine, and the way she would interpret labs was incredible, and nobody else in the world had it. And I have been, I hate the term, but a biohacker for more than 10 years. And even despite that, had my own issues with doctors gaslighting me. And I was working on something for perimenopause, so something for women between 40 and 50 on the roller coaster transition up to menopause. And now I am in the process of actively trying to delay menopause at 51. And now we are working together on Reve Health, which some of you guys know is the only health span company combining all of these things that Maddy was doing, and then what I was doing with life purpose and coaching and consulting and finding your why. All right, so Maddy will talk to Maddy. Then we're going to leave the best for last, though, Skylar. We'll talk about.
Yes, I am Maddie Cunningham. As Julie mentioned, I'm also the other co-founder of Reve Health. I'm a licensed acupuncturist, herbalist, functional medicine provider, and certified hypnotist. And as Julie mentioned, I combine all of these things together in my private practice and now at Reve Health to help people heal holistically. And I love being able to, yes, combine labs, but where Julie and I really saw and where our values really align is being able to combine that with life purpose and helping people really make actionable steps to change their physiology, but also their future through limiting beliefs and examining their life's paths and their lab work. So we have a really beautiful combination to help people heal. And last but not least, Skylar, our new health team member.
Hi, everyone. Skylar here. As you all know, or some of you know, I'm a registered dietitian, and I've just joined the team at Reve Health, which I'm so excited about. Maddy and Julie are both brilliant and really just changing the game when it comes to women's healthcare, which is so needed. A little bit of background about me. So actually, before I became a registered dietitian, I was an engineer. I studied in that field, and then I worked in the field for about 4 years, and along the way developed some interesting health issues that I also received a lot of gaslighting on in the medical space. But ultimately it led me to finding my passion, which is really working in with other people in the healthcare space, especially with nutrition. There's nothing I love more than nerding out about nutrition, whether it's like the really sciencey biochem side of things, or the more like playful components like seasonal eating, things like that, our relationship with food, really important, vital topics. So I've known Maddy for quite some time, actually. So this collaboration feels really just synergistic and really beautiful. And then I've just had the pleasure of getting to know Julie and just the dynamite that she is. So I'm really excited to be here and talk about all the things we have on the agenda this evening.
Absolutely.
We're so happy. We're so happy you're here. And then I'll just start it. I'll just kickstart it with last week. We had a conversation and we got into ChatGPT being wrong about certain things. And I will leave you with that, as you know.
Yes. So yeah, I went on a bit of a rant last week when we were on a different Zoom call. So ChatGPT, it can be a very useful tool depending on the circumstances or like the purpose that you're using it for. I mean, I have used ChatGPT a number of times before. It's really efficient. It can get things going. But it can also be a little dangerous if you're not using your critical thinking skills, or if you don't have the proper like area of expertise, we'll put it that way, with what you're asking of ChatGPT. It can be wrong. So, for example, I actually, because I used to be an engineer, I sometimes get people asking me engineering questions still, which I'm like, this is not my area anymore. But a few like minor things I can help with. And someone was asking me about what equation to use for determining the length of some wooden beam or whatever. And I was like, I'm gonna like just refresh my memory. So I got on ChatGPT and was like talking about the problem that I needed to solve. And it was spitting me out things that did make sense because I had that background as an engineer. I could critically think through that lens and that area of expertise. And eventually it spit me out the answer. And I was like, this does not seem right. It was just not right logically based on what I knew. And so I actually told ChatGPT, I was like, you're wrong. I don't think you did this right. And sure enough, it responded saying, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Actually, it's this. And why I'm bringing this up is I'm trying to draw a parallel here with, say you were getting on ChatGPT to be like, I was just diagnosed with PCOS and write me a meal plan. You
Mhm.
know, you could do that theoretically, and it would spit you something out. But what ChatGPT doesn't have, it doesn't know your entire lifestyle. It doesn't know your food preferences. It doesn't know about your relationship with your food. It doesn't know anything about your other past medical history. It doesn't know what your current laboratory markers are. Like it knows nothing about you, unless, of course, like you were feeding it all that information, lacking that clinical judgment and that expertise that someone with a background in nutrition like myself or someone like Maddy who has a licensed acupuncturist and herbalistic background. I mean, it can get a little dicey there. You're just missing that like vital human connection component, which is so important when we're making any sort of dietary or lifestyle change. So yeah, that's like, I'll leave it there if you guys want to react on anything I said.
Maddie?
Yeah. Oh, there's a whole lot of things to say.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I absolutely agree with you, Skylar. And I think that when I think about healthcare and especially when I think about women's healthcare specifically, we have to remember that women haven't been included in studies for a really long time. The literature and the medical background that exists, especially that's internet based and especially that's data driven, is highly based on men. So when we go into interfaces like ChatGPT, the answer is even if they're surrounded by something like PCOS, which is more of a feminine based issue, a reproductive feminine based issue, can we still trust that that is actually based on female results? Can we trust that ChatGPT is giving us a woman's body input? And my answer is absolutely not. Of course we can't. And at Rev, we believe in not only, of course, this approach of understanding with, especially with our foundation protocol, more women's based healthcare, but also super personalized. We are looking at so much of your physiology to give you an absolute personalized plan. That's my take.
I mean, all of it, but the relationship to food, I think, is something that very few people really talk about. And that is something that is completely personalized because it is your relationship to food. So I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about your approach with that. And when somebody comes in to see you, what are some of the questions you ask them, or how do you kind of get there?
Yeah, yeah. So this is definitely one of my most favorite areas to work in nutrition because oftentimes I work with clients who come to me maybe for another issue. It's not about their relationship with food. But in working with each other, or just even through how they refer to how they interact with food, whether they're using words like, oh, I shouldn't be doing that, or I'm so bad when I do this, like really kind of negative, um, negative terminology on like how they interact with food or how they feel about their body or whatever it is. And so a lot of times they don't even know that they have sort of this disordered relationship with food, or maybe some of these disordered eating behaviors. I'm not talking about necessarily like a clinically diagnosed eating disorder. That is an area I work with, but this is even just, disordered eating, which can be still really serious. So generally how this comes up is, again, I detect that kind of like negative language that they're using. And so I challenge them to kind of be like, well, why do you believe that you shouldn't be doing that? Asking a lot of open-ended questions to really get to the bottom of that. And if it's sometimes it's usually a response like, oh, well, my doctor said I should try this, or my friend did that and it really worked great for them. It's usually like a lot of external information instead of really getting in touch with their internal cues and what actually feels good in their body. So a lot of times it's tapping into like, well, what does feel good for you? What does that even look like? What is a good feeling in your body? Are you able to feel adequate hunger fullness cues? Are you able to feel satiated after your meals? What is preventing you from, having that food that you're craving and then maybe like you find yourself overeating these bunch of other different foods? So it's very complex and it's definitely a more like sensitive topic, a very like intimate experience for a lot of people when we have those discussions. But I do find it's the foundation. We really can't get anywhere else on improving our nutrition and our overall health if we have this really fraught relationship with food and our body. So yeah, it's an area I feel really passionate about.
I mean, it's so interesting because I don't think people really think that you're typing in for a meal plan or you're trying to get, you're looking at labels or you're in Whole Foods thinking you're doing everything right. But if you don't actually understand your relationship to how you even feel in general about eating, I know a lot of women who are members actually, and they're just busy. They're traveling all the time. They wanted to know if they have cheat days. Can they have a cheat day? And all of it seems very kind of disordered, as you were saying. It's like this weird relationship where like I can't eat or I'm going to fast until noon or I'm only going to eat on the run and I only give myself 5 minutes. I don't
Mhm.
really think we think about how unhealthy that actually really is.
Absolutely. And a lot of those behaviors have become really normalized. So it's not surprising that a lot of really like high achieving, accomplished women are kind of falling into more of these. I almost consider them more like masculine eating patterns in some ways, where it just feels really rigid.
Yeah.
And really, we want our relationship with food and our nutrition to be a little bit more fluid and a little bit more adaptable. Really come from this place of nourishment rather than restriction. I think that's like a huge flip we can take when I work with clients where a lot of them, come from maybe trying some more of these restrictive diets and looking at food sort of as this scary, nuanced topic of like, oh, I can't have that. I can't have this. I can't have that. So
Mhm.
this is really hard. How am I going to get everything I need? And instead, I challenge them to look at it more from the lens of abundance and be like, well, let's think of this as nutrition by addition. What can we add to what we're already doing to make it more balanced, make it more optimized, make it more nourishing in general? And there's a million different ways we can do that. Sometimes it's like, how do we just layer in opportunities throughout the day where we can slow down a little bit, really try to take in the food on our plate so we're not just mindlessly fueling ourselves and just looking at food only as fuel too. That can be problematic in and of itself. Um, Stop me if I'm just going on too long of a rant, but I
I feel
can.
like that is very masculine too, where they, it's like it's literally your fuel. And
Yeah.
it's out there that are talking about how to pack the calories and for your
Mhm.
weightlifting and getting as much protein as possible. And it's not even about eating anymore. It's just about absorption and
Yeah.
No
weird.
enjoyment.
No
Yeah.
enjoyment.
No enjoyment.
No
Always.
nourishment. I mean, I totally agree with the perspective that Skylar says, just becoming so masculinized, the approach so singular, and we've forgotten how much food is nourishing, how it is life force energy, how especially for women in our bodies being so cyclical, it's so incredibly important. I've had the privilege of working with Skylar as a client, and as someone who I consider myself to have a healthy relationship with food, Skylar, there were a few times where she was like, what food rules have you made up in your mind that I subconsciously have been carrying around? And for women, it's just so common to associate carbs as bad. and things that we shouldn't be eating. And Skylar had to correct me a few times, and it was a correction I so appreciated, because there were these subconscious beliefs that I had about things that I shouldn't be eating that had no basis in reality.
You
And you
can't really
don't
work
get,
out without
yeah,
carbs, right?
yes, you don't get that insight unless you're working with someone who's trained to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, carbs are not the enemy. They're our body's preferred source of energy. It's what our body uses first. They're meant to be used for energy. They're very efficiently used in our body. And also a lot of foods that contain carbohydrates contain so many other great nutrients like fiber, really awesome micronutrients, antioxidants, which are extremely anti-inflammatory for us. Like we don't want to be afraid of carbs, and when we're kind of in this situation where we're labeling foods as straight up good versus bad, and we're assigning this morality to them, it can get in this strange headspace and this strange territory where then we're kind of putting certain foods on a pedestal. And in the end, like our brains work a certain way. And when we give food that power, like we are very vulnerable to it. So the minute we are labeling carbs as bad, it's almost like we want them more. And then it gets us in this sticky situation where then maybe we're avoiding them, and we're overeating other food groups. And then maybe we just don't feel good and we're blaming it on like the food, when in reality, it's actually our relationship to food that might need some mending. So yeah, absolutely. Anytime I work with someone, I always start there.
I mean, I think it's a very good place to start.
Yeah, incredible. The relationships are so important. I mean, just like relationships in general, you have to have healthy relationships.
Right. And to know when you're getting when you're going down a path. I
Yeah.
think, well, I mean, one of the things, and we had some questions too earlier, and I know I would love to do another webinar for the holidays specifically, but as
Mhm.
we're entering into the holiday season, I personally noticed that I've got really negative associations with Thanksgiving. For like, I'm a
Mhm.
vegetarian. We haven't really gone, we should do another one just on that too. But Thanksgiving has been a really problematic holiday for me where I almost would double down on everything else, like pies and, potatoes or whatever, just because I was restricted by my own choice for not eating the main meal. And I think that everybody I know actually has some sort of almost negative feeling about holiday eating, or something where it's like you're going to allow yourself to maybe have a little bit of the treats or whatever. And I don't know if we want to talk a little bit more about that, because it's October, but
Yeah.
it's very quickly going to be Thanksgiving and holiday.
Yes, absolutely. The holidays are very triggering for people. I mean, for I think every single one of us, we could say like in some way they're triggering. There's just a lot. Like you're just around a lot of people. Sometimes you're around like certain family situations that are more triggering than others for whatever reason. There's these expectations around the holidays. It's just kind of stressful. It's a season where we should be, really enjoying ourselves and just spending time with loved ones and all these like happy, joyful things. And it can be that, but I don't think we should completely dismiss that it is kind of like overwhelming and triggering sometimes. And oftentimes we revert to controlling our food in whether that's a restrictive way or setting up these like food rules, like what you talked about, how it's like, okay, I'm gonna like save up all day long so that when I get to this meal, I can have that pumpkin pie. And that thought is actually a form of disordered eating thought pattern where you're saving up all day long for then to be able to enjoy something. And that can backfire for so many reasons. One of the biggest pieces of advice I give to my clients around the holidays when they have a lot of holiday parties or get togethers, things where there's maybe like more treats and things like alcohol and whatever around that people feel really vulnerable around. My biggest piece of advice is to not go in undernourished and
Ah,
restricted. I
interesting.
think a lot of people tend to take that route, but that can backfire because in the end, you might end up so hungry by the time you get there that you're like, your biological response kicks in and you're like, okay, I'm so hungry. That cookie's smelling amazing. Like everything kicks in your brain and your digestive hormones, and you eat the cookie and then you eat another one, and then before you know, it's this like spiraling process. So one of the best things you can do for yourself is nourish yourself as you would throughout the day. Eat your balanced meals, especially trying to get in some sort of a protein rich snack before you go to a holiday party can be really helpful. Protein is extremely blood sugar regulating. It's really satiating. It can help kind of like blunt some of these like unnecessary, I don't want to say unnecessary cravings because cravings are valid too. But maybe ones that you wouldn't have had if you went in a little bit more properly nourished. So, examples would be like have some roasted nuts, hard-boiled eggs. You know, can we do, I mean, there's a million options you can try, but something that works for you that makes you feel good is really the key there.
I like that. Maddie, I don't know if it's interesting because the biological response and your digestive hormones, I picked up on that because I don't know if I ever even really think about that. It like if I feel like been this person that doesn't eat all day and is saving up for the 7 p.m. party so that I can have the alcohol, it's really not great. But again, even that thinking, it's like, why is that happening? And then I inevitably will eat something that I feel like I shouldn't. And I never even associated it with it as a biological response.
Yeah. Yeah, it's your cephalic phase of digestion, if we're going to get scientific on it.
Yeah.
Where your digestion actually starts and kicks in the minute you like see food, you smell food. And so that's why like being around certain, like when you're watching like a show that has food in it or a commercial, and like that's why that stuff is so effective because it does stimulate digestion in you.
So interesting. We don't
Yeah.
even think about that. I mean, we are human beings.
Yes.
We are meant to nourish ourselves and eat food.
Yeah.
We are meant to nourish ourselves. I know it's so important. And I love that tip from Skylar about, treating it like any other day, going into it, being nourished in the morning, keeping everything stable. And I mean, I bring emotions into everything because that's who I am. But I think that that pressure that can come with the holidays and that emotional dysregulation that potentially is coming around being around family members or people that you're not used to being around, anything that's going to provide that sense of stability is going to give you more grounding in your body. And that is especially true of blood sugar. So I love that tip from Skylar about treat it like any other day, provide your nervous system with that normalcy, show up for yourself so you have the capacity to give to other people that maybe you don't typically give to on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think a lot of people, whether it's subconsciously or intentionally, like we tend to almost like blunt our like emotional relationship with food. Sometimes we don't give it enough weight and brevity that we should, which then can lead to this sort of like dissociative relationship with how we're nourishing our food. So there is a fine line of like, okay, are we emotionally eating, or are we like so far removed from like how we relate to our food, whether it's like you just rely on convenience foods or packaged foods, like because you're just like, I just want fuel, like I just need something. And so really trying to establish an eating pattern too where you feel a connection to it. I think that's really important and often overlooked, especially like when I'm working with really busy women, things like that. And so really we're going to be realistic about it, obviously, where we can't like romanticize every single meal, but can we find small moments to have that like feeling of romanticism, whether it's like you're gonna sit down at a conference room meeting and say there's tea being served. Can you at least like hold your tea in a way that feels like really nourishing and like you're building a connection with it and like you're using that as an act of okay, like I'm grounding myself so that I can show up as my best version in this meeting, this really important meeting that I'm gonna like kick ass at.
Oh, I love it.
I love it. I mean, grounding yourself and nourishing. And that, I know that wasn't a question that we had, but people who are traveling a lot where it's just you're grabbing and going to try to find some time to have a better connection with food. I think
Yeah.
that's really, I was just thinking about my last business trip and it was, I mean, it's hard, but I think if you go down to even thinking about that, it's actually really truly nourishing you and grounding you before this big meeting,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
key.
Yeah. Looking at all these moments as an opportunity to like raise your energy and like raise your vibration. And, I think the more we stress too about what we're putting in our body, like we feel that. We feel that in our digestion. Like we're going to get a stomach ache or like just have maldigestion. Maybe we're not absorbing the nutrients as well when we're in this state of like stress, with whether it's an external stress or we're stressing directly about the types of foods we're putting in our body. So really, like my mission as a registered dietitian is to make you fall back in love with food in a way that feels really simple and like easy and fun and playful as much as possible, so that we're not in this like really intense, rigid environment with food.
Maddie, I want to make sure you have room for this. And I know it wasn't on our list of questions, but I know that I've had this question before in the past, which is, uh, what's the difference between a registered dietitian and somebody who gets their little plant-based nutrition course online? I mean, they're similar to ChatGPT, right?
Yes.
What
Oh
is
gosh.
the difference with
I'm
your?
also very passionate about this
Yeah, Skylar is
question.
armed and ready for this answer.
I Throwing it out there.
Yes. Oh, there's a big difference. So, um, the main difference lies in the education model, I will say. So, as well as like how we would practice with someone and how we're recognized in the medical healthcare space. But fundamentally speaking, so education wise, anyone can call themselves a nutritionist, but not everyone can call themselves a registered dietitian. It is a license that you have to hold. We are upheld to ethics. We are upheld to needing to renew our license every 5 years, which requires continuing education. So we're staying up to date on the latest evidence-based research that's coming out. Our education model has changed a little bit the past year, as of 2024. Used to be that we were just required to have a bachelor's degree. Now all registered dietitians are required to have a bachelor's and a master's degree. So 6 years of college education at minimum. You also have to complete about a year-long rigorous, clinically based, as well as community and food service based hours through an accredited institution, whether it's offered through a hospital or a school, where it's basically supervised practice hours. So really hands-on. I completed mine at UC San Diego Health Hospital Systems, which was an amazing opportunity. I was exposed to, surgical ICUs, seeing people right out of car accidents, things like that. The burn ICU, I was seeing people on dialysis, which is external kidneys, essentially. I was seeing people in all different sorts of settings. I got exposure to inpatient eating disorder treatment, more like intensive outpatient eating disorder treatment. So that's kind of where I discovered this world of like, oh my gosh, so many people's relationship with food is like so fraught. But back to the education. So pretty rigorous education is needed to even enter the pathway of applying for those clinical dietetic internships. And then once you complete that internship, then you have to pass a national exam, which is not easy. It's a very like obscure exam. You have to study for it, sort of thing. It doesn't have a super high pass rate. I think it's like 60 something percent. So it's not a joke. Um, And then once you complete all that, then you have the registered dietitian credential. So it's very different than someone who took a 3-month long online course to get a certificate that says they are a plant-based nutritionist
Right.
or a hormone specialist or a gut health specialist. Like, I don't know, there's so many different things that exist out there. I would even like have a little bit of caution with I don't want to, put any other areas down, but the nutrition therapy practitioner, that's only like a year-long thing. I think it's like a online and maybe there is some in-person element. But what I would caution about that is it's a very like biased way of of getting your nutrition education. That's part of the beauty of working with a registered dietitian is I was trained in a very like unbiased manner. I even like before I went into becoming a registered dietitian, I had a very like strong biases about certain things in nutrition. And then as I was going out through the curriculum in my school and being exposed to these like very real clinical settings, I I had to leave those biases behind and I was like, wow, yeah, there's a lot more out there than what I thought was right for myself. And why that's so important is when I'm working one-on-one with people, I will never inflict my biases on you. Like that is my training is to no, I am a knowledge resource for you. I'm a guide. I'm your supporter. I'm an accountability resource, but I will never tell you that like this is the right way to do things. This is the wrong way. I always say nutrition exists on the rainbow. It's not black and white. There's a lot going on in between. And so yeah, that's my little rant on why you should work with a registered dietitian.
Well, obviously we believe that too, which is why we're not part of
Oh my
this.
gosh, of course.
And
Yeah.
I'm the one who like loves these questions, even when we weren't gonna do these questions. But some people, especially in the world, some people are like, well, the food pyramid's outdated. And I don't know if we want to talk about that your approach to things are so unique. Like even
Mhm.
with the relationship, like you have this degree, you have the background, you have all of these studies, and then the way that you are interpreting it, that's like
Mhm.
even back to like Maddie of has the credentials,
Yeah.
but not a lot of people do, but other people do, but nobody has that unique interpretation. So I feel
Mhm.
like you're in the same camp of very few people. I don't know if anybody else is like you with how you look at food and nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think a lot of or some people in the more like functional holistic integrative space sometimes look at registered dietitians as like you guys are very Western medicine trained. Like, what do you know about like more functional integrative medicine? And that's where I respond and I clap back and I say, like, I got the registered dietitian credential so that I could get like that really firm clinical, like really solid understanding of the human body anatomy, physiology, biochem, like all of those things that are going to make me ultimately a really strong clinician and healthcare provider. But what makes me unique and what allows me to then use that RD credential for the better is I now have a very like well-known credential that's recognized by people like medical doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, people who are maybe working with patients and clients who are struggling, but I can be recognized by those people as someone who doesn't just have this little certificate. And so I can help kind of like change that paradigm too that we've built where it's more of this like um cohesive, like we're working together to make this patient feel better. So I can bring in my more integrative, functional medicine minded kind of philosophies and ways of thinking. At one time in my life, I was a patient on the other side. And that's like where I fell in love with the idea of more integrative healing modalities. I loved using acupuncture. There was a time where I was very sick. I had chronic Lyme disease, and that's partly what like inspired and ignited this whole journey in me. And I wouldn't have made it through that healing process if it wasn't for Western healing modalities in tandem with more of these Eastern healing modalities, like acupuncture. I used herbal antibiotics to help with heal my Lyme disease. But did I use some prescription medications that helped me at the time? Of course. Like I was going to do whatever it took to help me feel better. But I think it's like really important to, have that balance in our healthcare model where, yes, we need the acute care people who are very just like focused. If you get in a car accident, that sort of thing. We need the people like Maddy who are using acupuncture and herbs and this beautiful way of thinking when she interprets lab work. And then we need the people like me that kind of like sit in the middle of that and can help kind of like, navigate it all. So yeah, there's
I love that. I think we
Yeah,
need all of that. It's
we
integrated.
do. It is integrative. And Skylar, what I love about your perspective, and I mean, just having known you for so long, is that like Julie was saying, the credentials are really important. It establishes credibility. I was friends with you while you were going through your internship. I know how rigorous that was and how demanding it was. And your personal life experience, you having to go through the chronic Lyme journey. And I, again, was friends with you during that time. I know how hard it was. And you being able to speak from that perspective of, I know what works, I know what doesn't, I know how to heal my own body holistically in a way that aligns with my values. And how can I then be that unbiased person who sits there and helps other people do the same? What's aligned with your values and your relationships, and how can we then carry that forward into a health plan? It's so beautiful, Skylar. I've seen you do it so many times, and so many people appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, it's honestly, I tell people all the time, like it's such a privilege I to be in this position where I get to work with people on their relationship to food, their body, like be have these really intimate conversations and then watch them grow. I think it's just such a cool process and really amazing to be on the ground floor with. And that's why I say, I'm like, gosh, I have the best job in the world. Like what a privilege this is. And now I get to do it in this Rev healthcare space, which is just, I'm so excited about. So
I think it's so important. I mean, and I know we could keep talking. I mean, we could just go. I mean, there's so many things. I know we had other questions that some people, Maddie, I don't know if you want to, if there was anything else that I know I missed. I know we wanted to talk a little bit more, maybe. We talked about the personalization. I don't know if we talked about the meal plans, how you feel about that, I don't know if we have enough time. We've got like 15 minutes.
I say let's answer one more question. And I
Okay.
think that if you're okay with this one, Skylar, because I think this is pretty relevant to people, especially our Boston cohort, as they're like starting their protocols. One of these questions is, how can we honor our food preferences while pursuing our health related goals? Like, how do we find that balance between, like, we know there's some stuff, we got a lot of work back, we know there's some stuff we got to heal, but there are things that we really love. So how do we find that balance when people
Yeah.
are actively healing?
Yeah, this is so important. So first of all, I mean, I would say it's really imperative to identify like what are your food rules versus your food preferences. And where that difference lies is a food rule is typically driven by some form of like external cue or information. It also like feels a certain way when you say it in your body, tapping back to like energy and feelings. When you say a food rule, it might feel like you get this like surge of like stress around it or like, oof, like that this feels scary almost in some ways. So you kind of have to like tap into that intuition and that intuitive side. A food preference is usually more something like I'll just give an example because that might bring some clarity too. Like I am gonna enjoy this salad because I love the crunchy texture. I think it tastes amazing. I love, the way it makes me feel when I eat it. I feel really satiated and amazing. Versus if you're coming from a food rule, you would say, I'm going to eat this salad because it's what's healthy and what like is going to help me lose weight, or it's what this person told me I should be eating. It feels very disconnected from like your own inner, like what feels good. So I would say like first kind of getting clear on like, have I developed these food rules and not even knowing it? Like, am I just eating a salad every day for lunch because it like is what I was supposed to be doing, or am I genuinely enjoying it? And then when we're thinking about like these health protocols that we might be on, or if we have like a certain food sensitivity or we're having digestive issues and things like that, it can be really hard to navigate our relationship with food throughout that process, because sometimes there is a point in time where we have to change up our dietary pattern in order to kind of like help calm our immune system, our inflammatory response, whatever it is. And so, as much as possible, this is usually where I turn to how can we talk about these protocols and the food in a way that feels really aligned and supportive. So instead of saying like, oh, I can't have that food because, Maddie put it in my protocol that it's inflammatory for me or something, whatever it is, we can use terminology of right now, this food isn't serving me in the way that it should. And so it's
Mhm.
taking like the blame off the food and instead saying like telling your body that my body just needs a break from this and I want to feel good, I want to heal. And so if it takes me, I have to remove this or like avoid this for a little bit, that's fine. Like it doesn't that just feel so much
Feels
better?
so much better.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
Yeah.
like
I
felt my
like that.
shoulders drop a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't wait for my report that has
Yeah. Yeah, really like our words matter and like how we talk to ourselves and how we talk about food, that all matters.
It's beautiful.
it should be beautiful, actually. Our relationship to food should be. It should be
Um,
nourishing and amazing. And even, when we have our retreat, like the community dinners,
Yeah, it's gonna be so healing.
the
Yeah.
beauty of just really celebrating being together and eating nourishing food.
Hmm.
And then
Breaking our gluten-free bread.
breaking our
Yeah.
gluten. I know, I'm actually now both Maddie and I. How do we reframe that? Can't do gluten. Gluten does not serve us.
Gluten is currently not serving us.
Really not.
Yeah.
Maybe one day in the future it will
Gluten
serve.
doesn't serve me right now either.
Right.
So
Oh.
Funny that if I'm in Italy or France, I seem to be completely fine, right? We should have another webinar about why is that?
food system problems.
Right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
food system of the United States food system. But it's not just you, it really is a thing.
Yeah.
We had more questions, but I mean, honestly, I think this is so valuable, Skylar. We're so excited.
Yeah.
We're
Oh,
excited.
happy to be.
You're amazing. We're so happy that you're a part of Rev, and so many people are going to benefit from working with you, especially for their relationships with food. I think that catches people by surprise. So I think even hearing you talk about it tonight is going to be really insightful for people to evaluate where they're currently at.
Absolutely. And it's, just to reiterate, like it's not something to feel shame about. It's easy to kind of feel ashamed and be like, oh, what? I'm a 30-something-year-old woman. Like, why am I still having like problems? I thought this was a teenage problem, things like that. But no, I think if you like opened up about it, and like most women have gone through or are still experiencing some sort of fraught relationship with food in their body. And so I think the more we talk about it and the more we like the better off we're all going to be.
I agree.
I
Um,
agree.
and we'll put the link in for people can book a one-to-one with you. And of course, you are going to be looking at all of the reports for
Mhm.
foundation and longevity. So if you're a member, you are getting the wisdom of Skylar as part of your membership, your protocol.
Yay.
So
So
good.
All right, I'm going to stop recording.
Amazing.
Good.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Stop recording.